Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. We're assembled electronically for the purposes of having several public hearings today on legislation that's pending before us. Before we get started with the hearing, so we'll begin with committee introductions. We'll start with House Chairman Chiazzo.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Chris Chiazzo, representing House District 28. No eagles, no rivers, no ponds, just a marsh and some pigeons and turkeys. Good morning.
Senator Farron.
Good morning. I'm Brad Farron, live in Orange Walk, represents Senate District 3, which is the majority of Somerset County. Good morning, everybody.
Representative McCray.
Morning, everybody. I'm Jay McCray, representing Harpswell, West Bath, and Northeast Brunswick in the House.
Representative Supika.
Morning, I'm Lauren Supika, and I represent District 126, which is a portion of Bangor.
Representative Tuttle.
John Tuttle, District 18, part of Sanford, Mr. Chair.
Great. Representative Corey.
Good morning, House District 25, Patrick Corey. I have a prison in my district, so you guys can be as jealous as you want.
Representative Wood.
Good morning, I'm Barb Wood, and I obviously missed some discussion before we got going today. I represent House District 38, which is the western end of the peninsula in Portland.
Great, and my name's Louis Lucchini. I represent most of Hancock County in the state Senate. With us today, we've got our committee clerk, Karen Montel, and we have our two committee analysts today. We have Sam Prower from OPLA, as well as Janet Stocco from OPLA.
Senator Lucchini, good job on a Monday morning starting out. You remembered yourself. Thank you. That's good. That's a good start.
I'm learning every week, Senator. Right, so before we get started with the hearings portion, we'll cover a few of the, ground rules for a virtual committee hearing. So just a reminder to everybody, this meeting is currently being live streamed on the committee's YouTube channel. So this means that anyone who's a participant in the meeting via Zoom can be seen and also heard if your microphone is unmuted. People on the Zoom meeting who are waiting to testify in the attendees list won't be seen or heard until they're called upon to speak. We always note that as you're being brought into the panel, it sometimes looks like you're being dropped for a couple of seconds. You may lose audio, but just be a little patient and you'll pop up into the meeting. And then once up here, you'll be able to unmute yourself and turn your camera on and testify with the committee. As always, our committee's audio is being live streamed at the legislature's website. And if you've submitted written testimony, it's available for us on the legislature's website, is available for the public as well. Regarding the chat function of the Zoom meeting, it's just a reminder that that's for technical assistance only. It's not for any substantive work. And if any committee members would like to ask a clarifying question, just raise your hand or your virtual hand and I'll try to see you and call on you to ask questions. So as usual, we begin with the bills followed by co-sponsors, then those who wish to speak in favor, followed by those in opposition, and lastly, those who are neither for nor against. And for members of the public, just a reminder that when you're called upon, please state your name, your residence, and the organization you represent, if any. Only remarks on the legislation pending before us are considered in order. And a reminder to everybody that testimony is limited to 3 minutes, so please tailor your remarks accordingly. And so at the first part of this hearing, just so everybody will know our order, we're going to begin with LD 1285. Then we're going to move to LD 1308. And then we have 3 bills on open primaries. And so we will merge those into one public hearing and let the sponsors begin presenting the bills, and then we'll move through the list of those who have signed up to testify in advance. So with that, I'll open the public hearing on LD 1285, an act to require an official declaration of war or congressional action to call out the state militia before the Maine National Guard is released for combat duty. And I will recognize the bill's sponsor, Representative Sampson. Welcome.
Thank you. As I was listening to all your chats, I have to say this morning I was listening to the loons on a lake, and we really have amazing things here in Maine. So Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs, I am State Representative Heidi Sampson, representing the good people of House District 21. That's Alfred, Limerick, Shapley, Newfield, and Parsonsfield. I would like to present LD 1285, an act to require an official declaration of war or a congressional action to call out the state militia before the Maine National Guard is released for combat duty. Did you know that since 1776, we as a nation have had Congress issue a declaration of war only 11 times? The last time was June 4th, 1942, when the US declared war against Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania. Since then, Congress has only issued authorizations for use of military force, such as in 2001 and 2002, to address the global war on terror. That is not the same as a declaration of war. Members of the Maine National Guard are our neighbors, our friends, parents, siblings, and children. They are citizen soldiers who, when not training or engaged in national emergencies, are members of our local community where they are running their businesses, working full-time, raising their families, or still enrolled in institutes of higher learning. They're a lot like you and me, citizen legislators. In other words, most of their world, as ours, is dealing with everyday life in their hometowns. They, however, carry an extra heavy burden of responsibility as they can be called up at a moment's notice to enter very dangerous and challenging situations. Just as the Maine National Guard members swear an oath to uphold our state and federal constitution, we do as well. Therefore, as members of the Maine State Legislature, we must honor our Constitution and the enumerated structures of government. We, you and me, here in Maine, have the authority to require the federal government to first require a declaration of war before our citizen soldiers are sent off to foreign conflicts. This is the long and short of this bill. LD 1285 does not prohibit the National Guard from conducting training missions in this country or on foreign soil to effectively prepare and be battle ready should they be called upon. But it is our duty to protect them from entering a conflict unless Congress fulfills its constitutional obligation and declares war first. We as a legislature do not have the right to direct where our active duty forces deploy. However, we do have the right to determine where and when our citizen soldiers of the Maine National Guard are deployed. The cost to our national treasure is brutally high. Suicide rates of roughly 22 veterans a day loom large in the lives of veterans and their families. I am a sister of several combat veterans, and more currently, I am the mother of a combat National Guard flight medic who served in Iraq. The reality of the impact of war is very real. The stress on the veterans and their families trying to help navigate life with a battle of daily haunts with PTSD can be staggering. Nearly 20% of veterans who have seen conflict in the Middle East in recent years struggle with a fluctuating range of debilitating PTSD. Learning how to cope can be a daily challenge. It is the unseen, powerfully debilitating disability. The bottom line to this bill is simple. The executive branch cannot take our treasure, our guard, without first following the Constitution. We, as state legislators, have the power to make sure they do not. I thank you for your consideration. I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
Thank you, Representative Senator Farren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Sampson, for bringing this forward. And I can hear your passion in your voice about it. I just have to ask, I guess my question is, you say this is very simple and straightforward. Having spent almost 30 years between the active duty and the Guard and being involved in some of those things, I don't see it as that simple. You know, there's different statuses, you know, Title 10, Title 32, constitutional issues, and also from a state of Maine standpoint, you know, the planes in Bangor, those aren't state of Maine assets and other things. Have you dove deep into the implications of not having those? We used to be our strategic reserve, and now the Guard is an operational reserve. And have you dove into those issues of funding, resources, pulling missions, and what the implications of this bill would be?
You asked some wonderful questions. Have I dove into them? Yes, as an infant would be swimming in the deep end of a pool. So there are folks that I think will speak more effectively to that than I can speak to it. I am aware of those concerns, but I'd like to let those who, I don't know what I don't know. So I would rather have them speak to that. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Representative Sampson.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will move to the public hearing portion of this meeting. And we'll go through the list of people who have signed up to sponsor in advance. So we have Raymond Cloutier, we'll begin with, followed by Dan McKnight.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Cloutier. Yep. We can't see you yet, just so you know, but it's fine if you don't have your screen on, whichever you prefer. Oh, yeah.
Forgive me, this is my first day using any of this tech. Yeah, I'm Ray Cloutier. I'm a 21-year disabled veteran. I served in the active Army. But this issue is just not just for me. I also represent American Legion Post 39 in Madison, Maine. We passed a resolution on this in support of this, because it's not just a legal issue for us, it's also a moral one. The problem is National Guard are Maine soldiers. The first three primary missions of the National Guard is for Maine. Their last mission is to go to foreign soil and fight if the federal government meets its obligation and get an act of war. The reason this is important and why I say it's a moral issue is because, quite frankly, if you're sending soldiers to foreign lands to fight without an act of war, then they become very compromised in their definition. Are they mercenaries because they fight for money? Shock troops? The world's police force? Are they UN soldiers? No. National Guard are the state of Maine soldiers. Their three primary missions are definitely infrastructure, emergencies, civil unrest. You know, these things, there are people. They're not federal troops. The government has to ask our permission. That's why an act of war is needed. To do so without it taints what they do. They took an oath. Why can't the federal government meet their obligation? That's our standpoint. And I know what our opponents to this are going to say, and I've already heard it. Funding. Yep, funding. I get it. Money means everything. But is that the point you want to tell every veteran and every soldier currently serving that we're just funding? We're supposed to go and die, make more money. Hey, if you don't die, you enter the VA system, you're worth more money. See what I'm saying? So it's definitely an irritation on a moral level to reduce the men and women that serve this state to nothing more than commodities to be traded for political gain or business gain. That's our standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cloutier. Any questions? Senator Farren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ray, how are you this morning?
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
So a couple things is that I know the post up in Madison supported this, and I just want to, as a member of VLA and as a member of the post up there, I'm not supportive, and I want to just make a point and have a discussion a little bit. You talk about, it's not just about funding. You know, there's also different things. You talk about soldiers. Well, part of the Guard is airmen and soldiers, and there's also folks that are federally piece of that. They are on Title 10 orders all the time doing a full-time mission, even though they belong to the main Guard. So I go back to my question to the sponsor of the bill. Have you really dug deep into even those jobs? And we're all volunteer force. The folks that belong to the main Army and Air National Guard do it on a volunteer basis and know that. So I just wonder if you've thought through the process of what that impacts those soldiers and airmen lives that have volunteered to be a member of the main Army and Air Guard.
May I respond?
Yep.
Well, I realize that some of them are in that capacity. However, that's not the National Guard's the oath they took at all. They're not full-time soldiers, and that actually makes a big difference. Usually, and I actually just had to Google a bunch of this. They're deployed 3 to 5 years intervals. However, that hasn't even been done. What happened is now, once I deploy you as a National Guard for 1 year, you come home, I instantly put you in a different unit so I can deploy you again, which is not their purpose. They don't get multiple deployed. Most National Guard are actually serving on foreign soil in combat and hostilities longer than professional military, the federal level. So you're taking people that agreed that they're going to be here on our soil taking care of the state of Maine. And if Congress actually meets their obligation and gets an active war, will go definitely. Without hands down, they'll do it because that's what soldiers do. But to just have them focus on one mission when it's only a fourth of what they're supposed to do. As long as they're deployed, they're not here. So what does Maine have? We don't have our National Guard. They're gone. They're always gone. And, several members of my family had 14 tours in the past 20 years. Show me an active serviceman that's full-time that does that. It doesn't happen. They're abusing our National Guard because it's cheaper and easier for them to do so. So I do definitely think it's a moral issue, as well as a constitutional one. The federal government has not met what they are supposed to meet. We have oaths, they have they fail to do it. The National Guard doesn't belong to Homeland Security or anybody else. It belongs to the state of Maine. And just use funding as a fear tactic is redundant. It sends a very bad message.
I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Senator Farren. Any other questions for Mr. Cloutier while we have him here? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cloutier, for your testimony.
Thank you. You all have a great day.
Up next, we have Dan McKnight, and he will be followed by Harrison Kemp. Dan, whenever you're ready, sir. Oh, sir, you're on mute still, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Dan McKnight. I'm a veteran, 13-year veteran of the military. I served in the United States Marine Corps, the active duty Army, and the last enlistment was with the National Guard, where I deployed to Afghanistan, and I was injured in 2005 when I was there, 2005, 6, and 7. I represent an organization called Bring Our Troops Home. We are a group of veterans ranging from World War II all the way through the current global war on terror. We've got tens of thousands of members, and this is a piece of legislation that we have supported in 31 states that have proposed it so far this legislative session. I want to remind people that when I joined the 3 different branches that I served in, I swore the same oath. I said, I, Dan McKnight, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Each of you as legislators took a similar oath to defend the Constitution. The Constitution states in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, that Congress, and Congress only, has the power to declare war. However, they've abdicated that authority to the executive branch for almost 80 years. The same Constitution that we support, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, states that the National Guard has a threefold mission, and that is to repel an invasion, to put down to repel an invasion, to put down an insurrection, or to enforce the laws of the Union. A declaration of war by Congress becomes the law of the Union. And at that point, things change for the National Guard. They should be an auxiliary force for the active duty military. They should be the force that goes and fights America's wars, but it should be done properly with a declaration of war. The founding fathers were very clear on this. And in fact, the Supreme Court's even weighed in on this. Governor Perpich and Governor Dukakis hated President Reagan. They hated his foreign policy. And he was using the National Guard to train in Central America. And they felt that he was using the National Guard to prepare for a military invasion in Central America. And so they sued, saying that they were not going to send their National Guard to be federalized under Title X orders. And the Supreme Court weighed in on this, on a piece of legislation called the Montgomery Amendment that was being challenged. And the Supreme Court said that the governors of the states do not have the right to withhold their National Guard troops for purposes of training overseas. They were very specific in their writings and their findings. They said training over and over and over again. They did not ever address the issue of overseas combat duty in an undeclared war. And the reason they didn't has been talked about and debated over the years. And it's because the Constitution already is very clear about that. And the National Guard should be used as an auxiliary force. Title 32 is a section of the military code that allows the active duty military, or excuse me, the National Guard to serve on active duty service. And it's generally a statewide mission, but it's federally funded. And Title 10, and I think the good senator asked this question about Title 10, so I'll address it really quick. Title 10 is when National Guard is called into active service with federal control and federal dollars. And that, I think, is that your question, Senator Farron, is how we deal with the Title 10?
Mr. McKnight, this is your opportunity for testimony, not for questions.
Right.
So if you could please limit your testimony to your statements, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Title 10 is when the National Guard is federalized to serve in combat and foreign training purposes. And we believe that there will be no loss of funding for this because no president in his right mind would ever remove funding to which would affect readiness or the mission that would happen in the actual state in the purpose of an actual emergency. And so we don't feel that that would ever happen. We've talked about it, we've researched it, and there's always been threats, but we don't feel that it's a credible threat because no state would or no president would ever limit.
Mr. McKnight, my apologies. Your time has expired. So if you could please, I'll give you a couple seconds to wrap your comments up.
Certainly. Yep. I'll leave my comments there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight. Representative Tuttle.
Mr. McKnight, where are you from in Maine?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tuttle, thank you for that question. I'm not in Maine. I represent a national organization. I'm in Boise, Idaho. That's my home of residence. I lived all over the country in 16 different states, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert.
Thank you, Representative Tuttle. Any questions for Mr. McKnight while we have him here? Representative Corey.
Hi, Mr. McKnight. What time is it in Boise, Idaho right now? Just so I know what time you got up to come speak with us this morning.
It's actually a little more complicated than that. We have our own unique lifestyle. It's 7:31 in Idaho, but I'm actually traveling in Louisiana right now. I'm down in the bayou, so it's 8:31 here. Thank you.
Oh, so you're cheating. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Any other questions for Mr. McKnight? Okay, seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Harrison Kemp, and he will be followed by Eric Brakey. Mr. Kemp, if you can hear us, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. My name is Harrison Kemp. I'm an Old Town resident.
We can hear you, but we can't see you, and that's okay. If that's all right with you, I just wanted to let you know.
Yep, that's all right with me. Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
My name is Harrison Kemp. I'm an Old Town resident, vice chairman for the Libertarian Party of Maine, and a veteran of the Afghanistan War.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Could we ask that the prop be taken down?
Mr. Kemp, do you have another screensaver that you could put up?
I do. It will take a moment, but I can.
I will reset your clock, sir. I'll allow you to start again when you're ready.
after he figures this out, I want to know how to do it because I wondered how I changed that image, not the background images, but the little like image on the thing. Oh, okay.
I will not be able to help you with that, Representative Corey, because I could not figure it out. So.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp, for your compliance. We very much appreciate it. I'll reset for you, sir. You can start when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. My name is Harrison Kemp. I'm an Old Town resident, vice chairman for the Libertarian Party of Maine, and a veteran of the Afghanistan War. This morning, the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee is deciding whether to uphold the Constitution they swore to protect and defend, or allow the federal government's executive branch to continue their illegal and unjustifiable use of our state's National Guard units. I implore the committee to pass on this important legislation, which seeks to reestablish the governor's position as Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard, unless Congress has formally declared war, the country is under invasion, or to execute the laws of the nation. Congress has not declared war since 1942 in support of World War II. Nevertheless, troops bearing the American flag, using American tax dollars, are engaged in combat actions across the world. So I have to ask, where are the invaders beating down the door? And furthermore, if there is an invasion, should we not all be more inclined to maintain our defenses rather than allowing them to be whisked away to foreign lands? And what law is being executed, which is of such great consequence to our residents that their defense force should abandon them in an effort to enforce it? As John Randolph said in December of 1811, is war the true remedy? Who will profit by it? Speculators, a few lucky merchants who draw prizes in the lottery, commissaries and contractors. But who must suffer by it? The people. It is their blood, their taxes that must flow to support it. The government of the United States was not calculated to wage offensive foreign war. It was instituted for the common defense and general welfare. And whosoever should embark it in a war of offense would put it to a test, which it was by no means calculated to endure. So with that, I'm calling all Republicans, Democrats, pacifists, constitutionalists, communists, libertarians, socialists, and veterans to support the passage of this bill. In the spirit of uniting against the greatest empire the world has ever known, of returning state sovereignty, of upholding the Constitution, of ensuring our safety, the right of self-determination, I call on you to support the passage of this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. Any questions for Mr. Kemp? Mr. Kemp, if you could take your image down, please. Thank you.
Yep,
any questions for Mr. Kemp while we have him here? All right, seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony. Up next, we have the Honorable Eric Brakey. When you are ready, sir, the floor is yours.
Well, it's good to see all your faces this morning. Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I am Eric Brakey, former Maine Senator from Androscoggin County, and I'm before you today to testify in favor of LD 1285, Defend the Guard. Do you remember where you were 20 years ago when the first Maine boots hit the ground in Afghanistan? While I may be a younger citizen than most on this committee, I'm old enough to remember the start of that war and the justification for it. That is not true, sadly, for our youngest men and women in uniform born after the war began and sent off to fight foreign young men and women who were also born after that war began. This began as a mission for justice, and that mission was accomplished. Bin Laden was killed 10 years ago. All his co-conspirators today rot in graves or jail cells. Yet the mission kept changing, first from a mission of justice, then to a mission of nation building, and now to a mission so foggy and unclear that no one can name it. After 2 decades of mission creep, the recently declassified Afghanistan papers revealed that top military officials have no clear idea of what victory even looks like in Afghanistan. Huge bipartisan majorities among both veterans and the American public at large say it's past time to bring our troops home. Yet a tangled web of private special interest influences hold back Congress from taking action as they passively allow the war to drag on for the benefit of war profiteers. As Major General Smedley Butler of the U.S. Marine Corps, a retired general and 2-time Medal of Honor recipient, famously said, War is a racket. Washington, D.C. continues sending Maine's sons and daughters into this longest war in American history with no clear mission, no end in sight, and not even a basic congressional declaration of war. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the U.S. Constitution empowers Congress and Congress alone with the power to make war on another nation. But since World War II, Congress has been content to obfuscate accountability and defer decision-making to the executive branch, which James Madison called the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15.
All right, Mr. Brakey.
I'm sorry, what's going on?
We just had some feedback. My apologies.
Okay. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 of the U.S. Constitution, known as the Militia Clause, permits Congress to call forth the National Guard into federal service to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. As was previously mentioned, in the 1990 Supreme Court decision clarified that the National Guard may be sent to foreign training missions without a declaration of war, but gave no authority for our troops to be sent into war without a declaration. So Washington, D.C. owes our men and women in uniform a clear mission and a clear declaration of war. Until such a time as Congress fulfills its constitutional duty, the Maine legislature should exercise its own constitutional authority to defend the Maine National Guard. Defend the Guard would not prevent the National Guard from deploying to other states to offer assistance or participating in training missions overseas or going into federal service for the reasons explicitly written in the U.S. Constitution. Its sole narrowly defined purpose is to prevent the National Guard from being used in illegal, unconstitutional wars and requiring that congressmen put their names on the dotted line before they ask our Maine soldiers to put their boots on the ground. I ask the whole committee to vote ought to pass on this very important legislation. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Brakey. Senator Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Honorable Senator Brakey, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Senator. It's good to see your smiling face.
Good to see you as well. Hey, a couple questions. You heard probably some of them asking beforehand, right? Is that I heard concern over that our soldiers and airmen deploying on Title 10 orders takes away from the resources here in the state of Maine. Are you folks familiar with how that planning process goes and how the resource documents work? I mean, part of that obligation is that we have to maintain the resources here in the state before forces leave the state. And my question is, do you folks understand how that process and that staffing document works?
Yeah, I believe that Dan McKnight was the individual who could speak most articulately to that. I don't think there was a question for him about that, but I'm sure he'd be more than happy to be available for the work session to go into detail on that. Unlike him and several of the other members who have testified today, I have not personally served in the National Guard, so I can't speak to the intricacies of all that. But I know that Dan and some of the others testifying today could speak to that more in depth.
So, and also this is a question, you folks here, and I understand that you're working on other states on this legislation. Quite honestly, out of the gate, this seems to be more of an issue that needs to be addressed with the federal delegation at the federal level. And are there efforts on that front with your group and these other groups addressing the federal delegation?
Well, I would say that Congress is completely and totally gridlocked. There have been efforts for 20 years now to, we've all seen it over the last 20 years since these wars began, of at various points, different groups kind of questioning both the constitutional authorization for these wars, the mission of these wars, what victory looks like. And despite the fact that none of those questions have been answered after 20 years and they continue to drag on, Congress is impotent to do anything about it. And that's why we need to look to the Constitution, which clearly gives the states constitutional authority over the various National Guards. And so this is a rightful constitutional responsibility of the states. Certainly the states have not exercised it in some time, and that's partly why we're in this situation today. The states need to stand up for the National Guardsmen, and that's the opportunity before you all right now.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Farron.
We're an all volunteer force, and those members of the Maine Army and Air National Guard that raise their hand, they actually swear to protect and defend two constitutions, the state of Maine and the federal. They recognize there's a federal mission as well. Have you given any thought to what, I mean, we talk about recruiting. I think you was a member when we passed the tuition assistance for our Guard members here in the state of Maine, and that some of those members, this is an opportunity to be a citizen soldier or airman and defend both the federal and the state constitution. Have you thought about how the folks actually wearing a uniform as an all volunteer force feel about that?
I fail to see how in unconstitutional, undeclared wars, now we have active duty troops in 150 different countries. We're at active war in 14 different countries. None of those have been constitutionally declared. I agree absolutely that like the Maine legislature, all of our National Guardsmen and all of our troops swear an oath to uphold the Constitution. I fail to see how wars that are gone about in an unconstitutional process fulfill those oaths of service.
One last one, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Farron.
Well, and you talk about war, and I know, you know, folks from all of our units have deployed around the globe to Afghanistan and Iraq, and you know, I did the Horn of Africa and Iraq myself, but there's also under Title 10 a number of humanitarian and training missions that are still under the federal piece. How do you differentiate between, because that's when those members changed from Title 32 to Title 10. How do you differentiate on who supports, if you consider so action of war or a humanitarian mission, because it all falls underneath that piece of what status they're under. So how would you differentiate between the two?
Again, I guess I would point to Dan McKnight, who could kind of answer some of these more detailed questions more in depth. But I would certainly say it seems to me that we have plenty of needs here at home. I mean, we're going through a pandemic. There have been many studies over the years that, you know, I think despite what you have alluded to, that there is a requirement of readiness here at home before our National Guardsmen are sent abroad. I would say that there have been many studies, and I'd be happy to provide some of those to the committee, that show that actually our security and our readiness here at home has suffered greatly because of our National Guardsmen being deployed abroad rather than being ready here for an emergency. Kind of like the emergencies that we've gone through over the last couple of years that have shown that perhaps, you know, our situation here at home is not always as secure as we might like to believe it is.
Sorry, well, I love this conversation. So I got to say, I think that I don't agree with the last piece about our readiness here. I think our soldiers and airmen in the Maine Army and Air National Guard have done a tremendous service. They've been involved in the pandemic, going back to ice storms and everything else. So I don't think our readiness, that's just my opinion and looking at the briefings that we get. I'd also say, you know, a couple of the comments made, and I'd ask your opinion on this, is that some people have said that it comes down to funding. Well, you know, part of the majority of the funding that we do get comes from the federal government for the readiness of the Maine Army and Air National Guard. We just went through this as a committee, going through the budget piece and how the allocation goes. If you take those pieces off the table, and you want to have the Guard 100% controlled by the state of Maine, that is a pretty significant gap that needs to be made up, or you do lose that readiness. How would you see balancing that between the state budget and the federal budget to keep the Guard active and ready?
So first of all, I would say two things. First, I would go back to the point that Dan McKnight made, that I think that the threats to defund the state National Guards from the federal government if we don't comply with their, you know, unconstitutional wars, I think that's a bit of a hollow threat. We'll see. This legislation is being posed now in 31 states. You know, if states actually start standing up for their guardsmen across the country, I think that's a bit of a paper tiger threat. But beyond that, I think that we also need to look at the fact that we say that this is federal government money, but it's not federal government money. This is money that was taken from us and is ransomed back to us by the federal government with strings attached. The Washington, D.C. doesn't have any money on their own. They tax it from us, they borrow it from our kids, or they print the money and steal it from the savings of the American people. So this isn't the federal government's money. If we're going to dance to the tune of Washington, D.C., whenever they try to, ransom our own money back to us, then we are heading down a very dangerous path that our founders would be appalled at.
Senator Farron, you good?
Yeah, no, we could go on, but we're good.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Brakey while we have him here? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Brakey, for your testimony. That concludes the list of people signed up for a public hearing. If there's anybody in the attendee room who wishes to speak who has not spoken yet, please raise your virtual hand and we will recognize you at this time. Okay, I will bring in Mr. Horton. All right, Mr. Horton, I just want to verify you are signed up for the next bill as well. I just want to verify that your comments are going to be related to LD 1285.
Yes. Oh, sorry about that. I didn't click the right thing there. Can you hear me okay?
We can, sir. You can start when you're ready. You have the floor.
Sure. Okay. Thank you all very much for having me here. I'm Scott Horton. I'm from Austin, Texas. I hope you guys aren't too cold this morning up there in Maine. I was asked by our friends at bringourtroopshome.us to join the testimony this morning is what I'm doing here. And so appreciate a couple of minutes of y'all's time. I am the director of the Libertarian Institute, and I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com. So first of all, I just wanted to point out, as you guys can already tell, seeing how the people testifying in favor of this, many of them here today are war veterans themselves and members of their own National Guard units and so forth, that this is meant to be pro-soldier, pro-guardsman legislation. This is constitutional, it's patriotic, it's American. And so, you know, that's usually when the topic of anti-war type legislation or activity is brought up, it is, you know, somehow made to be some kind of throwback to 1967 or something like that. But this is a whole new era here. And the anti-war movement in America now is led by people like Dan McKnight and groups like Bring Our Troops Home and Concerned Veterans of America and so forth, who have been there and back, who have fought in the 21st century wars, especially Iraq and Afghanistan. When we talk about the declaration of war here, it's not just a technicality. And, you know, fealty to the law in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, that is important. But there's a reason that James Madison and the framers put that power in the Congress. It's a question of responsibility. And I don't know if you guys know this story, but back in 2002, October 2002, before they voted on the authorization for war against Iraq, Representative Ron Paul was on the Foreign Relations Committee, and he introduced a declaration of war against Iraq. And then he urged all of his colleagues to oppose it, and he himself voted against it. But they all did too. And none of the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, much less the full House of Representatives, were prepared to put their name on the dotted line and take responsibility for the war. And Representative Hyde said that that was an anachronism. And boy, I'm sorry, I didn't realize how fast time was going here. So let me just say at the end here real quickly, for the progressives, you should celebrate that the Republicans, the constitutionalist Republicans, are finally really getting good on this and joining the side that the anti-war left has been good on all along. And now you can invoke the Republicans as protecting your right flank, that look, the Republicans admit that we're right about this now too. And also just one thing real quick, if you'll indulge me 30 more seconds.
I'll give you a couple seconds to wrap up, please, but your time is expired, sir.
Sure. There's an article in foreignpolicy.com that says that Biden, Blinken, and Sullivan, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, that they want to call an end to the war on terrorism now. And there's major pressure against them from doing so, but they need our support. So if Democrats and Republicans can join together on the state level and let their voices be heard and let the president know that we stand with him in calling an end to the 21st century terror wars, then that could make a really big difference right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony. Anybody else in the attendee room? I see Mr. Pickering. All right. Let me bring Mr. Pickering in. Mr. Pickering, when you're ready, sir. Mr. Pickering, can you hear me? If you can, sir, you're in the attendee or in the panelist room. Going once.
Chairman Tiazzo, you might want to remind him that he's muted.
Thank you, Representative Corey. I think you just did.
Oh, come on.
All right, Mr. Pickering, we can hear you, but we can't see you now.
Can I speak then?
You can, sir, when you're ready.
Okay. First, my name is Joe Pickering. I'm from Bangor, and which is the land of Paul Bunyan. I would like to totally support the bill that's been presented. I was in Massachusetts Air National Guard. My unit was activated way back in 1961 when President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev got in an argument over Berlin. And since that time, we've become war infested in our minds and in our behavior. And I totally, and Congress has really been totally paralyzed. So I think it would be wonderful for the state of Maine to honor our Constitution and insist that that Congress obey it. And I totally support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pickering. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony, and apologies for the technical issues at the beginning. Okay, anybody else from the attendee room that wishes to speak on LD 1285? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing on 1285. And we will open up the public hearing on LD 1308, which is an act to allow the Adjutant General of the Maine National Guard to request quick response funds from the Maine Budget Stabilization Fund after receiving authorization from the governor. And we will recognize the sponsor of the bill, Representative Hutchins. We'll move him in. All right, Representative Hutchins, you're here. When you are ready, sir, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chairman Lucchini and Chairman Russo. Remember and members of the committee, it's nice to be with you this morning. My bill that I am bringing before you today is LD 1308. I should tell you first that I represent District 131 in the Maine legislature, and that's made up of the towns of Penobscot, Orland, Dedham, Otis, Verona Island, Prospect, and Stockton Springs, all along the coast of Maine, where we also see a lot of wildlife and eagles, especially starting really soon in my area. We have alewives that usually start May 10th, and we have up to 10 pairs of fishing eagles as a general rule. This particular bill is an act to allow the commander of the Maine National Guard to request quick response funds from Maine with the authorization of the governor and state treasurer. Up to $100,000 can be made available to the Guard for, and these funds would be used only, in fact, they were only a guarantee of funds. Chances are they would never be drawn because the federal government covers these emergencies. But this request came to me from Brigadier General Donald Legassi Jr., Assistant Adjutant General of the Army. And his point in asking for it was to emphasize how important it is. Sometimes just a couple of hours can make in getting underway on one of these programs that they do. The New England CERFP responds within 6 hours from alert to chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear incidents within FEMA Region 1 in order to assist local, state, federal agencies in conducting consequent management to provide capability to conduct mass patient decontamination, emergency medical services, and casualty search and extrication. The New England CERFP is staffed by Air and National Guard units from Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. All personnel are Pro Board hazmat certified. The 16 personnel provide command and control of the CERFP, coordinating for equipment, materials, life support, and provides liaison to the incident commander as directed through the training. Search and extrication elements is part of it. Decontamination element, 75 personnel to conduct ambulatory and non-ambulatory mass decontamination. And time is on the essence on projects like this. And just an hour or so's difference while waiting for a federal release sometimes is going to make that difference in getting on site. And if the emergency has already been called and the governor has the authority along with the treasurer to guarantee up to $100,000, that is funds enough to start moving material and operations to a needed area somewhat quicker than if they're waiting maybe even just a matter of a few hours from Washington. So I'd be happy to take any questions that I'm capable, and probably not capable of answering many of them.
Thank you, Representative Hutchins, for introducing your bill. Any questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for the bill introduction.
Thank you.
We've got two people on the sign-up list. First, Scott Horton. We'll bring him in, the panelist, and he'll be followed by General Young. Mr. Horton, you have the floor again. Same rules apply, sir.
Sir, I just clicked the wrong button. I was here for the other one.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I'll be here for the work group thing if there's any further stuff going on.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Thank you.
Then we will go to General Young.
Good morning, Representative Chiazzo. Should I press?
Good morning, sir. Yes, no, when you're ready, sir.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm Scott Young, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Defense Veterans Emergency Management, and I'm here to testify neither for nor against LD 1308. It's our opinion the bill does not affect or facilitate the ability of the governor to call up the Maine National Guard in the event of a presidentially declared emergency. When a presidential declaration is made, we expect to receive authorization to use the Maine National Guard for response, in a federally funded Title 32 status. For COVID, the general requirements for receiving this authority was Maine must have an approved or have submitted a major disaster declaration request to FEMA. We must have activated state active duty of at least 2% of our Maine National Guard, and Maine must issue a resource request to FEMA and agree to the applicable cost share. In the case of COVID response, the president issued a nationwide emergency on March 13, 2020, and subsequently made federal funding available to Maine retroactive to January 20th, 2020. In order to seek approval for the use of the Maine National Guard in Title 32 federal status, the governor authorized activation to state active duty just over 2% of our service members. In just 2 weeks, we had approval to transfer all service members from state active duty to Title 32 with 100% federal funding. The cost of activating 60 members of the Maine National Guard to state active duty for about 2 weeks was roughly $182,000. Initially, the cost of this activation was carried by DVM through our Military Bureau, General Fund, Personal Services, and all other accounts. Ultimately, the federal government reimbursed the state through the Public Assistance Grant and CARES funding. I should note we also have a non-lapsing special revenue reimbursement fund, which can be used to fund activation of the Maine National Guard to state active duty. We typically hold $75,000 in this account. Our point is DVM has funding within the department equal to or greater than the $100,000 referenced in the bill, which we can use for the purpose proposed by the bill. One other point, this bill does have a sunset clause. For COVID response, federal funding has been available, and while COVID remains a national emergency, we expect federal funding will continue. This bill is not likely to have an impact for COVID response. And finally, for your consideration, Title V, Section 1532, subsection 8, already includes provisions similar to LD 1308 to supplement DVM's funding up to $1 million for emergency assistance to other states and the provinces. Maybe this bill could be amended to expand subsection 8 to include emergency response for the state of Maine. This concludes my testimony, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, General Young. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you, sir, for your testimony this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes those signed up for this bill. If there's anyone in the attendee room who wishes to speak on LD 308, if you could raise your virtual hand and we'll recognize you. All right, seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing on LD 1308. And I see Senator Lucchini is back just in time to kick us off for the next round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I had to step out for a few minutes. Yeah, next up we have 3 bills on open primaries. So what we will do is, as we normally do, we will merge all 3 of those bills into one hearing and give everybody 4 minutes to speak on each bill. So we'll begin with the sponsors of each bill, then we're going to follow with co-sponsors, and then we'll move to the public hearing portion of testimony. So the 3 bills that we have today is first LD 231, an act to establish open primaries. We have LD 303, an act to establish semi-open primary elections to allow unenrolled voters to participate. And LD 1121, an act to create an open and streamlined primary system. So again, we'll open the public hearing on all 3, and when we get to public testimony, people can feel free to speak on any or all of those bills. But we'll begin with the sponsor of LD 231 and recognize Senator Maxman. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and honorable members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Chloe Maxman. I represent Senate District 13, which is all of Lincoln County except for Dresden, plus Washington and Windsor, a total of 27 towns in the Mid-Coast. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of LD 231, an act to establish open primaries. This bill would allow unenrolled voters to vote in a party primary of their choice without having to join the party. They could only vote in one primary, and it does not allow Democrats to vote in Republican primaries or vice versa. For this reason, this is more accurately described as a semi-open primary model. I introduced this bill for two reasons. The first is that I promised my constituents. My district is almost a third, Democrat, Republican, and Independent. Countless unenrolled voters on the campaign trail lamented how they could not vote in a party primary. Their taxes pay for these elections, but they can't participate. They will vote on the primary winner in the November general election, but they have no say on who that candidate will be. This is how I fight for their voices. The second reason why I introduced this is a little bit more conceptual, but it motivates me nonetheless. I've knocked on around 20,000 doors in the past 3 years, including over 13,000 just last year. So I've talked with a lot of Mainers, and the number one thing that I have heard from people is a deep frustration with our political system that leaves our constituents feeling unheard, unrepresented, and excluded. We all work hard in this building, but there is still so much more work to do to restore faith in our democracy. Semi-open primaries is one of the major ways that we can do this in Maine. I know that semi-open primaries are not top of mind for the most exciting bill of the session, but I truly see this as one of the simplest and most profound ways that we can build a more inclusive democracy in Maine at a time when people are desperate for more voice in government. This was one of the key recommendations in Democracy Maine's 2021 report titled State of Maine Democracy. They write, as of November 2020, 31.9% of active Maine voters had an unenrolled party status. This significant portion of Maine voters is unable to participate in Maine's primary elections. Here are some of the reasons why semi-open primaries are needed. Number one, automatic voter registration is about to come online in Maine. Oregon is another state that has recently switched to AVR. From 2016, when AVR was enacted in Oregon, to December 2019, 80% of Oregon voters registered via AVR as unenrolled. Nationwide, 49% of veterans and 50% of millennials are unenrolled voters. All of this is to say there are currently and will be thousands of unenrolled voters who are left out of the primary process because they choose to stay unaffiliated. This to me is unacceptable for democracy and a state that strives to be representative. A key point here is the importance of primaries. Why are primaries so important in this conversation? In so many districts, primaries are the only election that matters. In Maine, 65 to 70% of Maine legislative races are determined in the primary. So independent voters are completely excluded from these huge decisions across the state. You might wonder what would happen if independents voted in primaries. I really like primaries. I think that they are vital for the political process to discuss the issues and candidates thoughtfully and thoroughly. And I say this as someone who has been through a primary. Including unenrolled voters in these conversations will make those dialogues more robust, more inclusive, and more representative of our districts. I also see this as a way to remedy the extreme divisiveness in our democracy. Primaries will become less about who best represents a party ideology and more about who represents the district. Let me address a few arguments that I've heard against semi-open primaries. One of the big ones is that someone should just register if they want to vote in a primary. Voting in a primary is the earned privilege of having a D or an R next to your name. To this, I say, why do we have to be so exclusive with this privilege? Why wouldn't we welcome eager and interested voters into our party? In fact, I predict that including unenrolled voters in a primary could increase voter turnout in November for the candidate that they choose. Also, independents are independent for a reason. Why would we ask people to forsake that identity? Another argument is that semi-open primaries could be used to maliciously skew an outcome, urging conservative independents to sway a vote against a certain Democrat or progressive independents to influence a Republican primary. But this can happen in Maine already, and it has under our closed primary system. Voters can switch parties 15 days before the election and under our current law and theoretically skew a primary, or they can show up on primary day to enroll and sway a vote. So semi-open primaries would not change this landscape. I ask the committee to not let fear drive our decisions on this one. There have been some valid concerns brought to me by the Democratic Party around ballot tracking and delegate counts. I have included amendments to solve these problems that I have sent to your clerk. My amendments do three things. First, it would require the election clerk to track which party's ballot is given to an unenrolled voter. So there'll be some history and record of that. The Second Amendment provides that an unenrolled voter who participates in the party's primary election must be considered a member of the party for purposes of selecting and allocating delegates. And the Democratic Party has said that this alleviates their concerns about the open primary model. And my third amendment is pushing the effective date of this bill to January 1st, 2024, which I did after a conversation with the Secretary of State. In the past week, this bill has been endorsed by Congressman Jared Golden, the Portland Press Herald, the Ellsworth American, and the Mount Desert Islander. There are dozens of Mainers in support. We've asked a few key voices to speak to you today, but most of the amazing supportive testimony is written to respect your time and focus. A couple other things before I wrap up. I know Senator Pouliot is a co-sponsor of this bill, and he was going to join us today, but is doing a ribbon cutting for his new office, so for his real estate business, so he could not be here, but submitted written testimony in support. And I also saw the Secretary of State's testimony and wanted to reiterate what she wrote, which is that we are willing to work with her office to make the bill language fit the needs there. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Senator Maxman. Any questions from the committee at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. So next we'll recognize the sponsor of LD 303, and that is Representative Lookner. Welcome.
Morning. Thank you, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, honorable colleagues on the Committee of Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Grayson Lookner, and I represent part of Portland. I'm here today to present LD 303, an act to establish semi-open primaries to allow unenrolled voters to participate. Maine has been and continues to be an innovator when it comes to election reform. We value the voices of all of our residents, regardless of their political connections or their economic clout. As a result, we have high rates of voter and civic participation, and that is something we should all be very proud of about our state. And both our state and our municipal governments are stronger because of it. We are also a state that embraces political independence, and we frequently elect candidates to both state and federal offices who are not enrolled with a political party. These candidates are often ideologically diverse, just like our state, although they frequently face obstacles that candidates who are not enrolled, or excuse me, who are enrolled with one of the two major parties do not face. One intractable aspect of our political system in modern times has been the reality that two parties dominate, and too often, instead of legislating and governing together for the betterment of our state, we end up in a perpetual campaign cycle, working more to deny the other party's success rather than getting things done for our constituents. I see two reasons for this. Firstly, the two major parties do not allow a broad swath of the electorate to participate in their primaries, which are conducted using public resources and taxpayer dollars. Although the vast majority of the time our leaders will be selected from one of the two major parties, unenrolled voters have their wills denied because they cannot vote in the primaries. If they were allowed to do so, I am confident that we would end up with leaders who better represent their entire constituencies. Secondly, smaller political parties face systemic barriers to inclusion, especially in statewide races. In order to qualify for statewide office as a member of a party, currently a candidate must collect signatures from at least 2,000 voters registered with that party, a nearly impossible task for a party that counts only 5,000 members statewide. This is a section of my testimony I want to focus on this morning because you heard in Senator Maxman's bill a lot of the merits of establishing open primaries. I also want to speak to my belief that currently parties are allowed to determine which voters they can permit into to vote in their primary. So in my mind, the parties should be allowed to determine which voters they want to sign their ballot access petitions. So this is an amendment that I've submitted here to allow unenrolled voters. If a party determines they wish to allow unenrolled voters to sign their ballot access petitions, they should be allowed to do so. Currently, a party can determine if they allow unenrolled voters to vote in their primaries. They should also be allowed to have unenrolled voters sign their ballot access petitions if they determine that that's the route they want to go. Can we really claim that we have a full democracy when we deny participation to unenrolled voters in primaries and systematically block other parties from qualifying for the ballot? In my mind, the answer is no. In this bill, and my proposed amendments would rectify this issue simply by allowing unenrolled voters to vote in the major party primaries and also allowing other smaller parties ballot access by letting those parties determine whether or not they can have unenrolled voters sign their ballot access petitions. A last amendment I proposed, and I'll let kind of the committee determine whether or not this is really feasible, is to allow for electronic signatures to be gathered for political candidates for ballot access, similarly to how signatures are gathered and verified electronically for the main clean election system. Especially during a pandemic in which social distancing is the primary method of preserving public health, it is unsafe and irresponsible to mandate that candidates go out in public in order to gather signatures for ballot access. Additionally, this change would allow people with disabilities, especially mobility issues, easier access to the ballot. It's time that Maine join the 21st century and allow for electronic ballot access. I'm a Democrat because I believe in quote unquote little d democracy. It is less often that we hear about little r republicanism, which means to be against monarchy and for a system of government controlled by we the people. Allowing unenrolled voters to fully participate in primary elections moves us more fully towards those American ideals. Thank you for hearing my testimony, and I will do my best to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Lookner. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you all.
So we're going to hold off on 1121 while we track down the primary bill sponsor, but we will recognize Representative Grahowski. She's registered for 231, but you obviously have the ability to speak on any bill. So Representative, when you're ready, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good to see you all. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I am Nicole Grahowski, and I represent the communities of Ellsworth and Trenton in the Maine House. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of LD 231, an act to establish open primaries. Whenever I'm weighing decisions and votes in Augusta or this year from home via Zoom with you all, my colleagues scattered across the state, I aim to stay grounded in the community I represent. It's clear to me from the conversations I've had at doors and around my district these past few years that many of us share the same values, and I think that holds true across all of Maine. We work hard, help our neighbors, and believe that a person's character is what matters most. We also value our civic duty to participate in the political process, turning out to vote at a rate that is the envy of the nation. Yet currently, our political process isn't living up to our shared values. That is why I support LD 231, which would allow semi-open primaries, meaning that unenrolled voters, often referred to as independents here in Maine, would be permitted to cast one ballot in the party primary of their choice. As you heard, Republicans would not be able to vote in Democratic primaries, and Democrats would not be able to vote in Republican primaries. There is a saying that all politics are local, and in Hancock County, 30% of registered voters are unenrolled and therefore currently unable to participate in primary elections without jumping through hoops. These are friends and neighbors who are registered to vote, engaged in the political process, and paying for elections in which they are not permitted to participate. This status quo is not in line with our values, and I believe our electorate deserves better. Fortunately, LD 231 will address our flawed system. Opening Maine's primaries to unenrolled voters will improve voter access and increase voter participation. It means that our unenrolled friends will be able to more fully participate in a system for which they are already paying, without having to temporarily affiliate with a party. Unenrolled voters are no more or less informed than other voters, and I believe we would benefit from hearing from them. Mainers are practical and appreciate common sense solutions to problems that need not exist. Semi-open primaries aren't cutting edge. 9 states already allow for them, including nearby New Hampshire and Massachusetts. In fact, Maine is only one of 14 states that has completely closed primaries. For a state that values and takes pride in our voter participation, it's clear we can do better. Mainers want to make this change. 80% of Maine voters support semi-open primaries. Yes, 80%. There are few issues with this much consensus, and I hope you will recognize the will of the people and join me in supporting LD 231. Thank you for considering this important reform to our voting system, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Grochowski. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Representative. Always good to see you. All right, I see Senator Baldacci is in the attendee room. I will try and bring him in so he can introduce 1121. All right, Senator Baldacci, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Representative Kate. Now, you know, with Italian names, I like to make sure I pronounce them correctly, and I don't want to. I thought last time I didn't do it correctly, but is it Chiazzo?
Chiazzo, sir.
The people
Chiazzo.
how to pronounce. We're in the same boat, but is it Chiazzo?
It's Chiazzo, unless we're in the homeland, and then it's Caiazzo.
Oh, Chiazzo. Is that? Thank you very much, Representative Chiazzo. And Chairman Lucchini, thank you. Good morning, distinguished members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I'm Senator Joe Baldacci, and I represent Senate District 9, which is made up of Bangor and Herman. I am here today to present LD 1121, an act to create an open and streamlined primary system. I am presenting this bill today because I believe Mainers have the right to be more involved in our political system and that our current primary election system is outdated. This bill would provide open primaries for the elections of United States Senator, United States Representative to Congress, Governor, State Senator, and State Representative. The bill would make it so all of the candidates for those offices, regardless of party or unenrolled, would appear on the same open primary ballot. The bill proposes that votes be tabulated using ranked choice voting, except the 2 candidates who receive the most votes for their respective seats will be declared winners, and their names would then appear on the ballot for the general election. As a result, ranked choice voting would not be used or necessary in the general election, but reserved only for the open primary elections. Instead, a candidate who receives a majority at the general election will be elected to those offices. Under this model, Mainers still get to exercise the ranked choice voting model they voted for, but in a much more efficient and transparent way. This is a system that's currently being used in 3 states, California, Washington, and Alaska on the West Coast, and being considered in a number of other states. It is my belief that using an open primary election model like this one describes would decrease partisan polarization in the state. After the horrific events at the US Capitol earlier this year, I think it is safe to say that partisanship polarization is at an all-time high. While trust in our elections is mixed across the country, with open primaries, we can begin to reconcile the partisan divide earlier on in the election cycle by providing a way to get Mainers more involved in the election process. Currently, political affiliation is required to participate in our state's taxpayer-funded partisan primary elections. Maine independents currently make up 1/3 of all voters in Maine, yet they are barred from participating in primary elections unless they declare affiliation. The bill would allow them to start participating in our election process earlier, as they should be allowed to. Across the country, independents are growing more popular than the two major parties. This is a trend that will continue as millennials play a larger role in this shift. Maine needs to adjust its current primary system to reflect that trend. We are currently disenfranchising Maine independents from choosing the major election nominees, and this bill would fix that. Maine's current mixed primary system is not reflective of Maine voters. It is outdated. It is time we take action. 15 other states currently operate with open primaries, and I say it's time for Maine to join them. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The major difference between this bill and the other bills, though, is that the primary election would be all candidates running and all voters are allowed to participate. So therefore, so everybody gets the same right at the primary election as well as in the general election to vote for the candidate they wish to, regardless of party. That's why it has been seen to reduce polarization, because it tends to attract people who are more in the political center in terms of this process. The last thing I'll say is that I'm also making the presidential primary in June, because I don't like the fact that that in presidential election years, we're having 2 primaries that are funded by the state. They typically cost about $1 million a piece for municipalities, or close to $1 million a piece. And it doesn't make sense to have 2 separate primaries within a few months of each other. And so this bill would combine those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Baldacci. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir, for introducing that bill.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Up next, we will recognize Representative Zager from Portland. Sir, you're free to speak on any of the bills, but I think you're signed up for 231, but you're free to speak to any of them if you like.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was going to testify on LD 231 and LD 303.
Yep, no worries, go ahead.
Representative Chiazzo, other honorable members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I'm Sam Zager, a military veteran representing the good people of District 41 in Portland. Pleased to testify on these bills. I'm in support because of the following reasons. Number one, I think that this semi-open primary model would be good for military veterans. Perhaps the fact that half of veterans are unenrolled or independent is a residual effect of being in the service. This is considerably higher than the 32% for the general population in Maine. US soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen don't take an oath to a person or a political party, as happens in other places. Instead, we take an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the ideals embodied therein. I know this committee is well aware of this. The distinction is at the heart of the American enterprise. Last summer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, responded to congressional questions, and he said simply, "I believe deeply in the principle of an apolitical US military. Even though military members and veterans are certainly entitled to have political views, having spent 11 years working with and listening to others in uniform, I understand why a veteran might be reluctant to join a political party. I don't think that Maine ought to keep that veteran from having a meaningful voice or a meaningful vote in places where their officials are determined in the primary." The second reason is that it would be good for all voters. Last week, Senator Hickman wrote an op-ed in the Portland Press Herald in which he stated that we have a responsibility to do everything in our power to proactively ensure that all eligible voters are permitted to vote, including our friends and neighbors who are registered to vote, but not enrolled in a political party. I agree. The third reason is that it's strongly desired by Mainers. The best available polling shows that 4 out of 5 Mainers, including Democrats and Republicans, very clearly express a desire for independents to be eligible to vote in Maine's primaries. If we believe that people's voices ought to be heard in a representative democracy, then opening up primaries to independent voters makes sense. Fourth is that all Maine voters are paying for the primaries, whether they're enrolled in a political party or not. One suggestion that I would make as you consider these bills is some sort of additional funding for clean elections candidates in the primaries. Like many other members of this legislature, I ran under the Maine Clean Elections Act. So my entire campaign had $3,650 to spend in the primary. In my district, it was largely determined, the race was essentially determined in the primary. There were 2 others in the primary, and one of the candidates spent more than 3 times what I was allowed to spend. People often can't believe it when I tell them how Spartan MCEA budgets are. This bill would have the unintended consequence of making it even harder for clean election candidates to take their message to primary voters because they'd have to reach more voters in the primary. One way to account for this and to minimize the fiscal impact would be to increase funding only for MCEA candidates who are running in a primary with traditionally funded candidates. I recognize that this adds a layer of complexity to the bill. I thank you so much for your service and consideration of these proposals. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Representative Zager. Any questions for the representative while we have him here? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Up next, we will recognize Representative Bailey from Gorham. Representative Bailey, when you're ready, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Caiazzo, and distinguished colleagues on the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I'm appearing before you this morning to testify in favor of LDs 231 and 303 and in opposition to LD 1121. I have, through happenstance, developed some expertise on the topic of voting systems and the type of elections and types of elections in recent years, including the nature of these bills. And I wanted to share my perspective. Should it be helpful to you in deliberating here? With regards to 231 and 303, both of which seek to establish what's called semi-open primaries, I've come to feel strongly that all Maine voters should have the opportunity to participate in taxpayer-funded elections. That was not always the case for me. There was a time when I would have not supported these bills. I thought that Democrats should be able to vote in Democratic primaries, Republicans should vote in Republican primaries, case closed. But over time, my views have changed on this issue based on evidence from primaries in the majority of states that have some form of open primaries. And I think the harm that has been demonstrated, and to me, at least from excluding unenrolled voters from primaries. I also took the time to reflect on this issue through the lens of my shared values: fairness, openness, inclusion, values that I think we all share as Mainers. I see 3 possible options to address this issue that the committee could consider. One is to enact semi-open primaries to allow unenrolled voters to participate in the primary of their choice, like a majority of states already allow. The second might be to require that political parties pick up the tab for their primary elections that only members of their party may participate in. And the third option that some states have deployed is to make voter registration nonpartisan and allow voters, when they arrive to vote, to request the primary ballot they would like. A number of states already have nonpartisan voter registration. Maine is one of only a dozen states with closed primaries. None of the other states that with semi-open primaries have problems with cross-partisan undermining of elections and no problems with awarding presidential delegates. Furthermore, many of the states with some form of open primaries have actually very strong political parties. There's no evidence that semi-open primaries in any way weakens political parties. In fact, I've come to believe the opposite might be true, and I could see how semi-open primaries might strengthen parties by bringing more people into the party primary process, helping them to recognize their partisan lean and perhaps even joining that party in time. With regards to LD 1121, I appreciate the intent of Senator Baldacci to open up the political process. However, I don't support limiting the number of choices in a general election to only 2 candidates. Voter participation in general elections, as you know, is significantly higher than primaries. In fact, Maine has some of the lowest voter participation in primaries on record during the past 2 decades. So restricting the number of voters who get to decide who advances to a general election limits the choice and voice of voters. In essence, the electorate in primaries skews older, wider, more partisan. If this bill perhaps allowed 4 candidates to advance to a nonpartisan, through a nonpartisan primary to the general election, I might support it with a caveat. The legislature and voters must first approve of ranked choice voting for the 3 state general elections that the Maine Supreme Judicial Court has issued a non-binding advisory opinion on that's interpreted the plurality provisions in Maine's constitution to mean pick one plurality voting, so that in that case you would have a nonpartisan primary, and then perhaps the top 4 plurality winners from that primary would advance to the general. Then you do ranked choice voting to ensure a majority winner and prevent vote splitting, etc. However, until we resolve the issue of ranked choice voting, I don't think that issue is on the table to allow some sort of top 4, even a top 5 system like Alaska and some other states have either adopted or are considering. So I hope that information is helpful. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Representative Bailey. Any questions for the representative while we have him here? All right, seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes everybody in the attendee list and who signed up as co-sponsors. So we can move on to the public hearings, or the public portion of the public hearing, and I will turn it over to Senator Lucchini to start that process off.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a reminder, we have merged all 3 bills together, so we'll give everybody 4 minutes to speak, but just a reminder to, when you get called in, to state your name, your place of residence, and the organization you represent, if any. And so we'll begin with Alicia Barnes, followed by Anna Keller and Betsy Sweet.
Hello,
welcome, Alicia. Yep.
Hello, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Alicia Barnes, and I currently live in Augusta. I'm here testifying as a veteran who defended the Constitution to defend it again in support of allowing all eligible Mainers to participate in our elections, whether they choose to join a party or not, by supporting LD 231, an act to establish open primaries. Shortly after I enlisted in the Navy, my ship, the USS Kearsarge, deployed to the Persian Gulf with 6 other ships and 10,000 Marines for Operation Iraqi Freedom. We went to war. I enlisted for many reasons, a sense of duty and a commitment to country, but the Navy also helped me put food on my family's table and keep a roof over their head. This was especially important for my son, who was a toddler when I deployed. I am grateful for my time in the Navy and for the opportunities it provided me, and I have done my best to pay it forward. I sat on the board of the Betsy Ann Ross House of Hope, a transitional home for homeless female veterans and their children, and served as the peer support lead for a veteran support group at Togus VA. And I am here today to respectfully ask that you vote in support of LD 231. Veterans are more affected by Maine's closed primary laws than nearly any other group. Nationally, 49% of veterans identify as political independents. Many of us have gone to war to protect our democratic ideals, and yet here in Maine, we are prohibited from fully participating in our democratic process. This is shameful. My fellow veterans who are eligible to vote should be permitted to do so, even if they have chosen not to enroll in a political party. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Okay, next up we have Anna Keller, followed by Betsy Sweet, and followed by George Simonson.
Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Anna Keller. I'm a resident of Portland, and I'm here today as Executive Director of the League of Women Voters Maine. The League of Women Voters of Maine believes that primary elections should encourage broad voter participation and that all voters should have the opportunity to participate in the primary election of their choice. More specifically, LWVME supports semi-open primaries over the various forms of closed or fully open primaries for candidate selection at all governmental levels. Unenrolled voters in Maine comprise 33% of Maine's voters, a larger group than either registered Republicans or registered Democrats. Among veterans, 49% are unenrolled, as are 50% of millennials. With the implementation of automatic voter registration, the percentage of unenrolled voters may increase. When unenrolled voters are excluded from party primaries, their candidate options are limited by more partisan voters and may have limited appeal to the election at large. In jurisdictions dominated by a single party, the candidate who wins the primary party is essentially guaranteed to win the general election. Given the significant and structural institutional supports that buttress the two-party system in American politics, and given the very high likelihood that one of the major party candidates will win any given election, the League supports broad participation in that selection process. While unenrolled voters in Maine can vote in the party primaries by registering a party preference on the day of the election, eliminating the registration requirement would reduce the psychological barrier of those voters who do not want to declare a party, and the paperwork required of voters and local election officials would be reduced. Compelling voters to become a member of a party in order to vote in a primary is not only a needless burden, it also violates their right to refrain from joining a party if they choose. The well-known constitutional freedom of association also entails the freedom not to associate. The League of Women Voters of Maine gives its highest priority to policy principles that protect and expand voter participation and turnout in all elections, including candidate selection systems. We believe that primary elections should encourage broad voter participation and that all voters should have the opportunity to participate in the primary election of their choice. For that reason, we support LD 231, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from committee members at this time? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, next up we have Betsy Sweet, followed by George Simonson, and then Lane Sturdivant. Welcome, Betsy.
Thank you, Senator Lucchini. Good morning, and Representative Chiazzo and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Betsy Sweet, and I am from Hollowell, Maine, and I'm here this morning on behalf of Open Primaries for Maine in favor of LD 231. I have been an advocate of the State House for almost 39 years now, and have spent most of that time encouraging Maine citizens of all interests and political persuasions to get involved in the democratic process by running for office, advocating for a cause, and first and foremost, always to vote. And honestly, I believe that right now we are at a critical juncture in this country and in this state. Many, many people are cynical about our democracy, about their voice or participation mattering, or even believing that politicians want them involved. At its core, I believe that LD 231 addresses that cynicism in a meaningful way and says, yes, you do matter, and yes, we do want you involved. You have already heard what this bill does, allowing unenrolled voters to participate in a primary. I will confess, about 10 years ago when I first heard about this idea, my reaction was negative. I thought, if you want to be in a primary, then register for a party. But as I started learning more and started watching what that really meant, here was what we see. Today, we see that almost a third of our voters register as unenrolled, that you've heard. Big swaths of people that we all want to be involved, you and I and all Mainers, 49% of veterans, 40% of currently enlisted people, over 50% of young people, and many, many union members and new Americans are registered as unenrolled, and as a result are locked out of the primary process. At the same time, in Maine and across the country, more and more races are decided in the primaries, almost 70%, and the general election is just a formality. That was certainly true for a number of you on this committee. So these big swaths of people being unable to participate in the very foundation of our democracy, voting when it counts, are shut out. But it doesn't have to be this way. LD 231 provides a path that says, yes, we want you in. We want as many people as possible to participate in this process. We do not fear more people voting. We welcome it. It strengthens people's belief in our democratic system. It makes people remove that veil of cynicism that says parties only care about themselves and their ideology. And I believe it makes for stronger candidates that have to appeal to a wide variety of people from the start. And just to be clear, this is not a radical or even cutting edge idea. Over 80% of Maine people support this proposal, and Maine is only one of 14 states that do not do this. So many of the fears that you may have or have heard about simply just do not occur. This is our chance to expand democracy, to encourage participation, and to restore faith in the democratic process. Let Mainers, all Mainers, know that their voice matters. Please vote yes on LD 231.
Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Betsy, I keep thinking about sort of, this is a big change. And as you said, 10 years ago, you were against it. It's a change. So we have to think it through. And, you know, I look at the pros and cons, and, you know, definitely the pros is it brings more people into the process, and we have more and more unenrolled voters, and bringing them in to participate more, I think, would be good. The con that I keep trying to think about is negativity, that I can't stand all the negativity in our campaigns. And is there sort of like a chance that this will increase negativity because you'll have people saying, well, let's vote for the Democrat that we want to have against our Republican, but not really the Democrat that we think is the best. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get that straight in my brain, is how do we try to get rid of that possibility of this actually increasing negativity in our campaigns?
Great, that's a great question, Representative Wood. And so here's the thing that we hear often, that people are like, oh my gosh, someone's going to rig it. You know, they're going to go after the Democrats are going to go after the independents and say, vote in the Republican primary and vote for the weakest candidate, or vice versa. And so even though that is a theoretical possibility, first of all, imagine, like all of you who get votes, imagine what that's like, right? So you're in a party, you have to convince a large number of people who aren't in your party to vote for someone that they don't like in another party, right? In order for your party. I mean, it's just so many steps. We have a hard time getting people to vote for the people that we want them to vote for. And so it's just a really, really unlikely scenario, and it hasn't happened. And there was a case in one state where they thought that this might have happened, and when they did research into it, it didn't happen at all. So I don't think that happens. And in terms of the actual negativity of campaigns, I think the broader group of people that you're trying to appeal to, the less likely it is that this, combined with ranked choice voting, that you aren't going to engage in that kind of negativity about personal, individuals and campaigns. So I think that those are fears. I get that, because it's a change, but it is not fears that are founded in any reality, I think.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm just trying to think that through.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's awesome. Thank you.
I guess, Ms. Sweet, since current law lets the parties allow unenrolled voters if they want to, has your group advocated within parties to invite other members to participate in the primaries, or have you only worked on state law?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we've only at this point worked on state law. I mean, I think that is another way to go. But again, I think it's a statement of the state and a statement of the democratic institution, little d, democratic institution of our government, to say we want as many people as involved to vote. And we want the parties to encourage people to vote as well. And we want people to give a voice. You know, the thing I've heard is, I've campaigned all over the state in the last couple of years, is people believe that their vote, people don't care, that they don't matter, that their voice does not matter. And there's a lot of cynicism, and I particularly see it with young people who I think all of us are anxious and desperate to get young people to participate. But when we say you can only participate if you want to be part of this system that they view as pretty broken, I think it's not a message that sells.
Right. I'm not arguing any message. Just curious if your group has tried to make parties change from within.
No, but we have worked with both parties, and I know that both of them are moving very much, I think, quickly to saying that this is a good idea.
Okay. Any further questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have George Simonson, followed by Lane Sturdivant and Tom Waddell.
Good morning, everyone.
in particular Senator Lucchini and Representative Chiazzo. My name is George Simonson, and I live in Harpswell. Also, I grew up in Connecticut with Italians, so I know all about Chiazzo. And good morning to the committee. Thank you for your work. It's a pleasure to see you all in gear here. It's very interesting. I would like to say a couple of brief words in support of LD 231 and the related bills. 86% of Americans believe that our government is broken in various ways. 43% of us, a plurality, including fully 50% of millennials, identify as politically independent. They do not wish to be members of any of the existing parties. Yet these people are our future. So it's no wonder that 70% of Americans support open primaries. You should too. The primaries are conducted with taxpayer money. The closed presidential primaries of 2020, for example, cost taxpayers $250 million, yet left out 30 million voters. That's not American. No one should be required to join a political party to vote. Here in Maine, establishing open primaries would bring us one step closer to a true democracy. I urge you to support LD 231 and the related bills. Let's let all voters vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simonson. Any questions from the committee at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you for testifying today. Okay, next up, we have Lane Sturdivant, followed by Tom Waddell and William Weber.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Lucchini and Representative Chiazzo and other members of the committee. My name is Lane Sturdivant. I'm a resident of South Thomaston, and I'm testifying in support of LD 231, an act to establish open primaries. I'm a proud voter, but I'm also a proud independent voter. So for every primary election, I wrestle with the question of whether I'm willing to sacrifice my independent voter status in order to vote for my preferred candidate. This is a dilemma that many, most even, of my friends face every primary election in Maine. Voters my age in our 20s and 30s are far more likely to identify as independents than older voters. According to a Pew Research Center, 44% of millennials, those born between 1981 and 1996, call themselves independents in comparison to 39% of Gen Xers and 32% of baby boomers. And sure, we can always change our party affiliation back to unenrolled after 3 months. But 3 months after last July's primary, the pandemic was still raging, and I was weighing whether the trip to the town office to become an independent voter on paper again was worth the risk to my health. I'm from Vermont. My sister's an independent, my parents are independents, my grandparents are independents, my great aunt is an independent. Being an independent is not merely a marker of my generation, it is a part of my family heritage and my cultural identity. My family members in Vermont have never been required to sacrifice their independent voter status in order to vote. They struggle to fathom why I have to. Aren't you more likely to vote for a party candidate in the general election if you're able to vote for that candidate in the primary? They ask me. Well, yes, I reply. Aren't you more likely to volunteer for a party candidate's campaign if you're invited to have a say in it as early as the primary? They ask. Well, yes, I reply again. Why do your state's political parties believe that you would vote for their candidates when they shut you out of their primaries? They ask. To that, I can only shrug. To them, it's common sense to include independents in primaries because it gets independents more invested in party candidates who might appear on the general election ballot. I wish Maine had an open primary system like Vermont, but I would settle for being able to vote in primaries without having to negate my independence every time. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Tom Waddell, followed by William Weber. And after that, Martin Groman. Welcome.
Welcome. Senator Lucchini and Representative Chiazzo and the committee members. My name is Tom Waddell. I live in Litchfield and I am testifying in support of LD 231. After the last election, the losing party took voter suppression to dangerous levels in many states. Fortunately, the Maine legislature is discussing LD 231, an act that combats voter suppression by letting independents vote in partisan primaries. At first glance, it seems counterintuitive for those not enrolled to decide who will represent a party in the general election. Looking a little deeper, though, one sees inconsistencies in our voting laws. Who pays for primaries? What part do primaries play in the complete election process? And what voting limits are consistent with the hallmark of democracy, which is electing candidates who represent the most voters? Everyone's taxes pay for primaries, but independents receive no benefit from taxes they pay for primaries. An impartial law would require political parties to finance primaries or allow every registered voter to vote. A more nuanced perspective of that argument recognizes that primaries are the first step in an election process that requires 2 elections to elect politicians. Preventing independents from voting in primaries is suppressing their right to vote in the complete election process. Opposition to increasing voter turnout in Maine is part of a national effort to suppress voter turnout. The Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation are leaders in the national effort to suppress voter turnout. Paul Weyrich founded these organizations based on voter suppression. In 1980, Weyrich spoke to 15,000 Christian conservatives, and I quote, Paul Weyrich said, "I know many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome, good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people, and they never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in elections quite candidly goes up as the voting population goes down. LD 231 will increase voter turnout. As voting population goes up, democracy and the people win. Restricting primary voting to the party faithful is the key to allowing divisive partisan politics to prevail. I urge this committee to vote that LD 231 ought to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Okay, next up we have William Weber, followed by the Honorable Marty Groman and Jill Martell. So welcome, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, and good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I am William Weber, a longtime resident of Portland, Maine, and an enthusiastic voter. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today in support of LD 231, an act to establish open primaries. I am passionate about voting, as you can see from my wallpaper, and I have not missed a local, state, or federal election in over 30 years. As a volunteer with AARP in the last election cycle, our team worked tirelessly with town clerks and municipal officials around the state to inform our membership of how to stay safe and make their votes count during the pandemic. I believe voting is one of the most important responsibilities a citizen in a democracy would have. I would I would like every citizen to have the same determination and passion to make their voice heard. But unfortunately, a large percentage of registered voters in Maine are unenrolled and are barred from an important aspect of selecting our candidates in the party primaries. Regrettably, Maine typically has low voter turnout in our primaries, which means that fewer and fewer Mainers are actually deciding on who the candidates will be. I was immensely proud of our new Secretary of State, Shannon Bellows, when she testified to Congress earlier this year on the best practices that Maine has adopted to lower barriers to citizen voting. But Maine could do so much better by allowing roughly a third of our registered voters who are unenrolled to participate in the selection process of the major candidates. Maine is definitely on the wrong side of this issue and is part of a small minority of states that do not allow unenrolled registered voters to cast a ballot in the primaries. As Maine starts to adopt automatic voter registration, the number of millennials that identify as independent or unenrolled will increase. The chart I submitted with my written testimony is excerpted from a Pew Research study on the increasing number of millennials across the country who have registered as independent. As I've grown older and perhaps wiser, I have become increasingly partisan. And up until a few years ago, I was against allowing non-party members to cast votes in our party primaries. But as our main political parties have drifted further apart ideologically, it is clear the independent voter plays a large role in determining the ultimate winner. Therefore, it does not make any sense to exclude unenrolled registered voters from the candidate selection process. Both parties would benefit from having stronger candidates that appeal to the broader base of voters and not to the fringe elements in their party. Today, our nation is at a critical station where our democracy is threatened, where our elected leaders are attempting to choose their voters rather than the voters choosing the elected leaders. Maine can do the right thing and end the disenfranchisement of hundreds of thousands of Mainers in the candidate selection process by enacting LD 231. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Any questions from members of the committee at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have the Honorable Marty Groman. Welcome. It's good to see you. And he'll be followed by, I don't see Jill Martell in the room, but Joe Pickering and John Long. So welcome.
Great. Thank you, Senator Lucchini, Representative Cazzo. Thank you to the committee for all you're doing and all your hard work. I'm here in my individual capacity to testify in support of LD 231. I want to thank you just for digging into this issue. As you can imagine, as an independent, I believe in this. I think we've all had this experience as running for our various offices where you shake hands at the polls, and it's kind of remarkable, isn't it? The difference in turnout when you're there in June versus when you're there in November. And I've always thought it was kind of a shame. A lot of times in June, there'll be other things on the ballot besides primaries. For example, bond issues and so forth are often run at that time, but people that just, don't show up because they don't have the opportunity to vote in those other in the primaries. And so that's always kind of hung with me. And I think also, hearing the testimony this morning has been kind of affecting. I want to point out that this is very open. I commend all of you for this time here, where you're not around the horseshoe. Obviously, I frankly probably would not have come to Augusta to testify this morning on this issue, even though I am passionate about it. But this is very open. And I think it's a nice parallel to what we're talking about here, where you can hear from all these voices. But Representative Zager, who I've never met personally, but to hear from veterans that this is something that they're interested in is kind of affecting for me too. So I want to thank you for pursuing this. I know it's a complex issue, and the committee will have tons of hard work to get it to where you want it to be. But the issue of semi-open primaries has my enthusiastic endorsement, and I'm happy to help in any way to move it along if I could do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee at this time? Seeing none, thanks for your testimony, Marty. Okay, next up, we have, I believe, Joe Pickering, followed by John Long and Justin Beth.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Mr. Pickering. We can't see you, but if you're good with that, you can proceed.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Unfortunately,
welcome.
What's going on? My name is Joe Pickering. I'm from Bangor, Maine, and I'm a member of Maine is for Open Elections. And what I'd like to say is I'd like to ask that each of you read the articles that I've written over many years on behalf of Maine is for Open Elections, because I believe that we should really have a true open primary system in Maine, not a semi-open system, but a true open primary system in Maine. Why? Because the world is changing. The fact of the matter is Maine itself is really very backward in terms of having a closed primary. It's like living in a dark room. And semi-open primaries makes a good step, but I strongly believe that we as Mainers, and if we follow our motto, we should help lead the nation. The first three words of our Constitution are "we the people," not "we the party." It's been said Maine taxpayers pay for our local elections, which are public and nonpartisan, and that all I would like to see is an extension of that to the open primary, so that there's a true nonpartisan election system. There was a former U.S. Republican Congressman, Mickey Edwards, wrote a brilliant book called The Parties versus the People: How to Turn Republicans and Democrats into Americans. He made many recommendations, including that the party should give up its control to public ownership, just as Maine has in the local elections. The same thing, we should be doing the same thing in our primaries. And instead of pretending the world is not changing, it is changing vastly. 50% of all of the millennials are now independent. So it really is changing. And I think what's happening, if I happen to be a registered Republican, I also vote Democratic. I split my votes. But I strongly believe that Mainers should lead, that our legislature should lead the nation and support nonpartisan elections, not pretend that semi-open primaries is the solution. There's been a quote here. There's been a reference that 80% of the people support a survey, support semi-open primaries. If it refers to the survey that we did in 1917 that we co-sponsored with Open Primaries National, that's not accurate at all. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I remember a delightful conversation, and Representative Bailey might remember it, where Maine is for Open Elections and Bob Croce, the late Bob Croce, who was one of the co-founders of Maine is for Open Elections, had a conversation, and we were pushing for helping to try to create ranked choice voting, which I think is a very important step, but it shouldn't be the final step. It should include the combination of a nonpartisan primary. And I remember Kyle pushing really hard for ranked choice voting. I said, well, we also should include a nonpartisan open primary. And he said, that's going to take 15 years. No, we should not wait 15 years. Kyle made some references to, Representative Kyle made some references to some of the problems related to Senator Baldacci's bill.
Mr. Pickering, just your 4 minutes has expired, but if you can sum up quickly, we'll give you a few more seconds.
Okay. You
sorry about that.
Can make the necessary changes, to be able to work all these bills together and come up with a nonpartisan primary system, whether it's top 2, top 4, or whatever. But don't leave. Honor the people of Maine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pickering. Any questions for members of the committee at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Okay, next up we have John Long, followed by Justin Beth, and then Secretary of State Bellows.
Good morning, Senator Lucchini, members of the committee. My name is John Long, and I am I reside in Bangor, Maine, and I'm speaking in favor of LD 1121, an act to create an open and streamlined system. If we ask ourselves if the two-party closed primary system has given us the best candidates, the vast majority would say definitely not. There must be and is a better way. The previous Congress has had an approval rating of a dismal 20%, and yet 90% of incumbents who ran for re-election were reinstated. How can this be? The answer lies in our flawed primary election system. A minuscule segment of those who are eligible vote to choose our candidates in Maine's two-party closed primary system. Only 10% of all eligible voters show up for the primary elections. These tend to be the most extremely politically polarized party members. The incumbents are not accountable to you or to me, only to the primary voters. In those districts, which are reliably red or blue, the election is over after the primary, and we, the 70% of independent voters, have nothing to say about the outcome. It is way past time to end Maine's closed primary election system. Mainers should take the best step forward for voter freedom and greater candidate choice, which is a true open primary. We taxpayers pay for these elections. We should own them and not the two political parties. The best step now is to have our legislature vote into law the top two primary open election bill, LD 1121, as proposed by Senator Joe Baldacci. All qualified candidates, with or without a party affiliation, may run in the primary. All certified voters are allowed to participate. If an incumbent candidate does a good job, they are reelected. And if not, they're out. The general election in November will be cast between the top two vote getters, irrespective of any political party. Please support LD 1121, an act to create an open and streamlined system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, we're going to recognize Justin Beth, and he will be followed by Secretary of State Bellows and Patty Du Bois. So, Mr. Beth, when you're ready, sir.
Good morning. Dear Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and esteemed members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. Good morning, and I'd also like to thank the other people that have spoken in favor of LD 231 and 303. Representatives Bailey, Zager, Senator Maxman, and of course, Grayson Lookner, who is sponsor for 303. I'm speaking today particularly about that particular legislation. My name is Justin Beth. I'm a resident of Portland, Maine, and I wish to speak in favor of LD 303, a bill that will seek to allow registered voters not enrolled in any party to sign petitions for candidates seeking to run in party primaries in which those voters are eligible to participate. I'll deviate a little bit from my written comments, but I spoke with Kent Ackley, independent, when he was serving, about open primaries. And to this regard, if voters are allowed to participate in a primary, they should be also allowed to sign for candidates. So as you've heard from many people testifying here, independent voters make up roughly 1/3 of the electorate in Maine, yet they currently don't have any input over the candidates running for our elections, right, in those elections for primaries. As a state that so strongly as independent voters, shouldn't they have a say in who should be on the ballot? And why are we leaving them out of this process? I speak in favor of this important legislation as a member of the Maine Green Independent Party, a party that has made the choice to allow independent voters to participate in our primary process since 2016. We've actually allowed unenrolled voters to participate in our primaries, and that is, the choice of a party to do that or not. But we are very strongly in favor of Senator Maxman calling all unenrolled voters to participate in primaries. Taking a step further, we believe that all registered parties should, in Maine, should value the input of independent voters. So thank you to Senator Maxman and Grayson Lookner's consider it landmark legislation to allow unenrolled voters to also sign for candidates. So the point of these pieces of legislation to ensure all Maine voters are given an opportunity to have a say in their candidates that they would like to see on the ballot, regardless of what party that candidate is aligned to. Rather than force these voters to conform to a given party's ideologies, these unenrolled voters should be given the freedom to sign in support of any candidate that they feel deserve to be on the ballot. Not only will Maine's independent voters benefit from this legislation, but the candidates themselves will also benefit from this, as they will have a strong case to reach out to independent voters ahead of the primaries. As a result, candidates will be better informed on the issues important to this significant group of voters much earlier in the process, and give them more time to connect with these very important constituencies, that too often is overlooked in our political process. In some, it is a win for the candidates and a win for independent voters in Maine. I truly hope your committee will make the most of this win-win situation and support this legislation and LD 231. I'd also like to say that, we encourage open primaries, allowing Democrats and Republicans to participate in, we're going to be considering that to participate in our primaries. I'd also like to say that I am opposed to the other bill, 1121. The top two primary system that is used in California is, in some ways, it really limits who the people can vote for in the general election. So basically, I'd stand in opposition to that bill. Thank you all for your time, and please remember that Black Lives Matter each day and every day.
Thank you, Mr. Beth. And just so you know, we do not have your testimony online. So if you can maybe want to try to send that on the portal, that'd be great. So any questions from the committee at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Secretary of State Bellows. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, distinguished members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee. I am Shenna Bellows, Maine Secretary of State. I'm here to offer testimony neither for nor against LD 231, LD 303, and LD 1121. With regards to LD 1121, given that Maine voters have repeatedly expressed their support for ranked choice voting at the ballot box, we do have concerns that a consequence of LD 1121 as drafted would contravene that policy. With regards to all of the bills, we understand the good reasons to move forward with a policy of semi-open or open primaries. And we stand ready to implement if any of these bills should pass into law. We especially appreciate Senator Maximum's willingness to incorporate our suggestions as an amendment to LD 231, and we are ready and available to work with the committee on amendments to any of these bills to ensure that the changes will work with our technology and processes should you decide to move forward. Under current law, only voters enrolled in a political party may participate in that party's primary. A voter who is unenrolled can enroll in a party at any time, including at the polls on election day, to be eligible to participate in the primary. Once enrolled in the party, as you have heard, the voter must remain in the party for at least 3 months before the voter can file an application to withdraw or change enrollment. A voter who is already enrolled in a party must file an application to change enrollment at least 15 days before the election in order to vote in the new party's primary election. And these bills do not change that restriction. Under these bills, an unenrolled voter could participate in a primary by informing the election officials at the polling place that they want to vote in a primary election for one of the qualified parties. And we would be required and would establish procedures to ensure that they would be allowed to participate in only one party's primary. We've discussed certain processes internally that will be needed to implement the law efficiently. We suggest that a voter would submit a signed form indicating the party primary in which they want to participate, and the election clerk would hand annotate at the point of checking off the voter's name on the incoming voting list with the party name or code. Having a written record of the party choice of each unenrolled voter would be imperative for accurately recording voter participation history after the election, as well as determining the correct number of ballots cast in each primary in the event that there was a recount or disputed election. The written record would not be used to update the voter's registration record since the voter is not enrolling in a party, but it could be used to check that voter participation history is accurately recorded for all voters. We anticipate there will be some additional costs to the department if these laws were to be enacted. First, we believe these bills will require us to print more ballots for each party. Prior to each election, the division reviews the number of voters enrolled in each party and provides ballots equal to a certain percentage of each party's enrollment, generally 50%. That percentage provides a sufficient number of ballots even for voters who enroll on or close to election day. We think these bills would have a positive impact on the number of unenrolled voters choosing to participate in primaries, and we would need to increase the number of ballots. As you have heard, there are approximately 362,000 unenrolled voters currently. And if 30% of these voters chose to participate in each party's primary election, we would need to print 108,000 ballots more per party, or a total of approximately 216,000 ballots. At the current cost of 50 cents per primary ballot, we estimate this would be an increase of 108,000 for ballot printing, plus an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 for delivery costs. For presidential primaries in March 2020, the per ballot cost was lower at 31 cents, so printing 216,000 ballots for the presidential primary would cost 66,960 plus 8,000 to 10,000 for additional delivery costs. Additionally, we would need to make changes to the processes for capturing voter participation history after the primary election. Currently, municipal clerks are required to scan the incoming voting list with a hand scanner or manually enter the voter's unique voter record number. As long as the voter's party enrollment is correctly entered in the central voter registration system, the voter's party affiliation is then included in the voter participation report. Under these bills, an unenrolled voter who chose to participate in a primary without enrolling in the party would not have an enrollment entered into the CVR. So we would need to change the current programming of the CVR in order to be able to capture the primary in which the voter chose to participate. Additionally, we anticipate that political parties would have an interest in knowing which voters participated in their primaries. In 2018, our CVR vendor estimated this coding change would cost approximately $10,000. Senator Maximum has delayed implementation of the policy outlined in LD 231 until 2024. We do believe that if this were to be delayed to that date, we would be able to include the change in our implementation of a new CVR. And finally, one place that LD 1121 could save the state money is in changing the presidential primary to align with the primary election for other federal and state races. We would be happy to provide those figures should the committee move forward. That said, moving the presidential primary to June could lessen the Maine's impact on the national race. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee or at the work session.
Thank you, Secretary Bellows. And I guess my question, I think you addressed right at the end. So pushing this out to a later date would defer the cost to be rolled into the entire CVR kind of RFP that we're about to embark on?
The programming costs for the central voter registration system, yes.
Sure.
The increased ballot costs would be consistent regardless of when it's implemented.
Right, thanks. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Secretary Bellows. Okay, next we have Patty Du Bois, and she'll be followed by Will Hayward. Patty, we can't hear you yet, or see you actually at this point. Oh. Looks like we may have lost Patty. So we'll go to Will Hayward and then we'll come back around to Patty if she's able to get back on. Welcome, Will.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Will Hayward, and I'm here today as the Advocacy Program Coordinator for the League of Women Voters of Maine to testify neither for nor against on LD 1121. In 2018, we conducted a formal study of primary elections and adopted a position in support of semi-open primaries over various forms of closed and open primaries at all levels of government, an approach that we supported earlier today in LD 231. The study did not reach a conclusion on nonpartisan primaries, and so we testify neither for nor against on LD 1121. We probably have more questions than answers on this bill. One set of issues I wish to raise has to do with the lack of practical experience and possible unintended consequences from what is proposed in LD 1121. A few things for consideration. The first is that we are not aware of any jurisdictions currently using this approach. While top two primaries have been used in a few states, in each case, the candidates for the general election are selected by a plurality rather than through ranked choice voting. This proposal is somewhat similar to one recently enacted but not yet implemented in Alaska. In Alaska, the top four finishers advanced to the general election with the winner chosen at that stage by ranked choice voting. This would not be possible for state offices in Maine due to the plurality clause in our Constitution. Next, using RCV in an open primary also has the odd consequence that the general election will always be a contest between the same two candidates who faced off against each other in the final round of tabulations in the RCV primary. Voters will have already registered their choice between those two candidates on the RCV primary ballot. Some might ask, what is the point in asking voters months later to choose a second time between the same two candidates? Next, a top two open primary may result in a general election between two candidates from the same party. This would occur anytime two of a party's candidates each receive more than 1/3 of all the votes cast by voters of all parties who vote in the ballots in the primary. Additionally, this bill would require independents and other candidates to compete more vigorously earlier in the election cycle, with a ripple effect on the qualification timeline and on campaign finance. It will require more money earlier in the campaign cycle, possibly calling for adjustments to the Maine Clean Elections Act. Some of the other benefits of this bill can be accomplished by LD 231, especially if RCV were extended to the general election for state offices. These benefits include enhanced voter participation in the primary, preserving the richness of the policy debate in the higher profile general election, and eliminating the spoiler effect. The League of Women Voters of Maine supports ranked choice voting that includes both primary and general elections. While RCV has been fully implemented for federal elections, we find that the current situation where general elections for governor, state senator, and state representatives continue to be conducted by plurality deprives voters of their full choice. While LD 1121 would ensure that these elected to state office have majority support, we favor a constitutional amendment enabling the use of ranked choice voting in general elections for state office. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Any questions from the committee at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
So we'll just circle back to see if we've got Patty Du Bois in. If not, we can make sure to get Patty here for the work session. She's always very helpful with election laws. Looks like she's possibly connecting at the moment. So I guess while we wait, just in case, just to go over the schedule, I believe that's all we have for today. We don't have any work sessions scheduled.
Can you hear me, Representative Senator Lucchini?
Yeah, we can hear you, Patty. Welcome.
Sorry, I've been having some technical difficulties, so I apologize for that. And luckily, I have no video, so you're welcome. Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Patty Dubois. I live in the town of Winslow, and I represent the Maine Towns and City Clerks Association. We are speaking neither for nor against all three bills this morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Primary elections are a function of the political parties and have required that voters who wish to participate in a party's caucus be enrolled in that party. State law requires voters to remain in a party for at least 3 months after enrolling before they can either unenroll or change to another party. Voters who are unenrolled can enroll in a party on election day and participate in that party's caucus that day. Primary elections are always confusing for the voters and are generally more difficult for clerks to administer due to the multiple ballot styles, vote tallies by party, ensuring the voters are issued the correct ballot, and general voter confusion regarding party enrollment and participation. It was evident in the presidential primary of 2020 that many voters who were unenrolled wanted to participate in the presidential primary election. This creates a huge challenge at the polls. The voter checks in with the election clerk and is told that they'll be issued one referendum ballot. The voter questions why they aren't able to vote for the president. The election clerk explains that they're not enrolled in a party, but they can enroll today and participate if they wish. The voter then expresses an interest in enrolling, and the voter has to go to see the registrar of voters, complete a new voter registration card, be issued a certificate of registration, and provide that to the check-in clerk. Then they have to go back to check-in, and then the clerk notates the new party and provides all of the ballots. This scenario played out thousands of times across the state on March 3, 2020, resulting in many voters having to visit the check-in clerk twice. This double check-in slowed down the voting process and resulted in longer wait times for many voters. These long wait times may have actually resulted in voters being disenfranchised if they were unable to wait. This bill would eliminate the process of enrolling and double checking in unenrolled voters who only wish to participate in the primary election. It would also eliminate the process of unenrolling voters after the 3-month required enrollment period has passed. Clerks like the fact that this bill combines all candidates onto one ballot, which would eliminate the printing and distribution of separate party ballots. This simplification would greatly minimize ballot distribution errors. Clerks did express concern that this consolidation may result in multi-page ballots, which would require more postage for absentee mailings. We're concerned that voters might misinterpret this new law in a few ways. Voters who are enrolled in one party might think they could request another party's ballot. Voters who change parties within the 15-day period before election day might feel entitled to vote in that new party's ballot. Voters who withdraw from a political party within 15 days before election day might still feel entitled to the opportunity to select any party's ballot. Many voters who are enrolled in the Green Independent Party don't understand that they're actually enrolled in a party and feel that because they're independent, that they are actually unenrolled voters, which is not true. If this bill is adopted, registered voters who are not enrolled in a political party would be entitled to select one party's ballot and vote in that primary election. If this should become law, we respectfully request that the state conduct a full voter education outreach program to promote this new change. This bill proposes moving the presidential primary from the first Tuesday after the first Monday in March of the presidential election year to the second Tuesday in June which results in fewer elections being held and is a concept that clerks do support. Since there has only been one presidential primary recently, voters likely haven't embedded that date, so changing it now shouldn't cause much confusion. Thank you, Representative Chiazzo. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Du Bois. Any questions from the committee at this time? Representative Tuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patty, now you're voting neither for nor against all three bills. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
This is probably one of those ringer questions, but if you were leaning, which one would you prefer?
You're trying to get me in trouble this morning.
I know it. I'm good at that. Yes. Yeah.
Well, since it's a party issue, we really didn't want to get involved politically, but I think it would, all clerks would agree that administering primary elections are difficult, and that if we could streamline it in any way, that would be favorable. So I would say that it would take a lot of the administrative burden off election day if primaries were open. It would eliminate the need to enroll voters at the polls, double check in, and then doing all that work after the fact, entering that data in CVR. So is that—
and having the presidential primary in June would also be acceptable to you folks?
Yes, definitely. Last year was certainly challenging. We did elections from, sunrise to sunset from January through December. So that would be helpful to not have another election.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be more just information for the work session. I want to make sure that we have information available because it does make a difference to those in each party to know who's voting in their primary. Because if we belong to a party, we are targeting that party during the primary. So if we were in a contested primary, we know who to go to, and it would be nice to know who's typically voting in our party primary so that we could be reaching out to those voters. I know for myself, when it comes to the general election, I tend to really go after the unenrolled voters when I'm knocking on doors because they're the ones that did not have the opportunity to possibly connect with me during a primary. So I'd want to make sure that that was something, and I think the Secretary of State actually touched on that, and I'm not sure and this could go to Ms. Du Bois because it would be something the clerks would have to tally and pay attention to during an open primary if that were to occur.
Right, I'm happy to touch on that. There is functionality in the CVR, which is what we do with current primary elections. To we enter the voter participation history by party, and that could certainly be done as well for those unenrolled voters. I think it's just functionality that would be required in CVR to not have to physically enroll the person in the party to include them in voter participation for that party.
Okay, great. Did you have a follow-up, Representative Kinney, or you good?
Oh, sorry, no, I'm all set.
Okay.
I'm driving, trying not to press too many buttons.
I'll get it for you. Yeah. All right, whoops.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just make sure that Representative Kinney has both hands on the wheel.
Yeah. We got the hand for her. All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you, Ms. Du Bois, for your help today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Okay, so that concludes the list of people who have registered to testify today. So with that, I will close the public hearing on all three of these bills, LD 231, LD 303, and LD 1121. The public hearing is closed. Okay, so Janet, do we have anything that we need to cover today, or are we good?
All set.
Okay, great. Thanks. And then we'll be back Wednesday at 10.
That'll be a long day.
Okay. All right, so we'll see everybody Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Looks like we have a long day with some hearings and some work sessions. So, all right, with that, the VLA committee will adjourn. So have a good one.